Hello card game players, this is being posted on my Magic the Gathering channel, however it is applicable to any card game you play. Whether it's Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Pokemon, One Piece, Digimon, Lorcana, you name it, this is going to apply to your game of choice. As someone who has played far too many card games and spent too much time looking and playing with cardboard, I'm gonna toss my hat in the ring and give the community some advice from my perspective. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is how to understand a card's primary purpose. And I'm going to try to keep this video relatively short along with the other ones because it's just one concept. Card games as a whole, I can't make one video and try to get everything. And as someone in education, I'm not going to jam-pack all of the information in one video, hour long, and expect you to retain that information. So I'm going to keep it relatively short, sweet, and to the point. So we have cards that often are complex and have multiple uses in card games. No matter what game you're playing, there's going to be a card that looks like a textbook. Just look at that Yu-Gi-Oh card. Super Heavy Samurai Prodigy Wakashi has a primary purpose of going and searching its deck for another card to put directly into play. However, it has an additional effect where you are trying to go into a Super Heavy Samurai only turn. Super Heavy Samurai is an archetype, but Super Heavy Samurai with Wakashi is not always played with that archetype. I personally played it in another deck called Sword Soul, where I was able to use this to set up a protection for my deck, and then I was able to go into my regular turn, and Super Heavy Samurai was able to be the startup free of cost. It took no turn action points. I was able to play it for free. It cost me next to nothing to play this deck, this card and its counterpoints in the deck. Now, its primary purpose here, though, is to go search out that other card. It's not to lock you into that archetype and only that archetype. So you're not playing it for that second effect. Genesect has an attack where it can make it that it can't, where the next turn it can't attack. It's a big attack, but your primary use of Genesect V is insane card draw. It's insane card advantage. You're drawing cards equal to the number of fusion strikes that you have. Now for Kaya, if you look over at Kaya, Kaya is one of those weird ones. You can see on the left side of the card, it says counter plus 2,000. That counter in One Piece is a defense against an attack. But if you play her, you can draw 2 cards and discard 2 cards from your hand. Different decks use Kaya for a different primary purpose. If you look at a Nami deck, a deck that's trying to get rid of all the cards in their deck, they are playing Kaya to play her. If you look at some other decks, her primary purpose is that she's a 2k counter, a 2,000 power counter. You need to know, why are you playing this card? Not, oh, it's a staple, it's used in all the decks. Why are you, the viewer watching this video right now, why are you playing this card? And you might be playing the same card as someone else for a far different reason. Now, you may be able to use a second ability, like Kaya with a 2k counter, as well as being able to draw more cards. You may be able to use a second ability, but inconsistent events should not determine whether or not a spot is made for the primary effect. Meaning, if the card, let's say Renin 6 here, Renin 6 enters the battlefield with 3 life, 3 loyalty counters as Magic players will call it. 3 life though, and you can uptick it, you can plus or you can minus, and if you get high enough, you can use an ultimate ability. When you look at cards like Planeswalkers and Magic the Gathering, you should next to never be trying to activate the ultimate as the reason you're playing the card. Renin 6 has an amazing ability where it can add consistency to your deck. It can return lands, which are the resource card, Pokemon its energy, Digimon its memory. You can essentially get lands back and you can keep playing them. Renin 6 can also deal damage or recur cards in your graveyard a lot. The primary purpose for Renin 6 would be to return the lands from your graveyard to your hand. The secondary purpose is to act as removal for small creatures. And the tertiary reason you would play this card is for the ultimate ability. You should not be playing Renin 6 for the ultimate ability. You should be playing Renin 6 for the ability that you will get every single time that you play Renin 6. Same goes for Galgamon. Galgamon on the right here is able to be used to put on top of another Digimon. Now that Digimon will be able to get more powerful as it gains inherited abilities of the former Digimon that are placed underneath the card. But it has an ability that says when you Digivolve, when you place this on top of another card, you get to place something else in your hand. You might not have that card in your hand, so you need to be prepared to play this card just as it is. Is it worth it? Yes? Wonderful. Play the card. No, you need the other card in hand to in order to use its effect. Think, how consistently are you going to have that other card? If you're not going to, look for a different piece. Look for a different card. Now, once you have determined the primary purpose of a card, you can either build around it or you can build with it more effectively. So when you look at building around a card, what does that mean? Well, if we look at Moana here from Lorcana, the ability We Can Fix It. Whenever this player quests, which for Lorcana is their way of winning, they turn their card sideways, tapping, resting, whatever you call it, suspending, and you are able to gain lore, which is a victory point. This card is able to pair up with other princess cards to be able to protect them, as well as being able to even attack them if you want to go on the aggressive. This is a way to double dip with our princess archetype cards. So this is a card we need to build around. So if you include this deck, you can expect there are going to be princesses, they're going to quest. Maybe you are going for an aggressive strategy and they're going to have a high power. Maybe they have another ability that they can rest, that they can tap, suspend, and use another ability. Now, what does it mean to build with a card? Well, if we go back to that Super Heavy Samurai Wakashi, he goes and grabs Super Heavy Samurai Monk Benkei. And this card is a card that you build with, not around. Wakashi goes and searches this. So this is required for that archetype, but it's not what enables it entirely. So you play Wakashi, you go search this out, and it enables the rest of your deck. So these are the kinds of cards. This is the equivalent of, with Moana, of the princesses. Now that you have a Super Heavy Samurai Searcher, you have to go play Super Heavy Samurai. In One Piece, it's like playing the EP01 Nami or any of the searchers that say, look at the top 5 cards of your deck, get a Straw Hat Crew card. Well, guess what? You're going to need Straw Hat Crew cards to be able to get something out of it. You need to play enough of those that you're able to get what you need consistently. If it's like this Yu-Gi-Oh card where you directly search it out, maybe you need 1, maybe you need 2. That can be determined on if you can play it from hand or if it has to be in your deck when you search. A lot of people who play Wakashi try to keep Benkei at 1 because it's dead in your hand, but they might play 2 because if it's in your hand, at least there's another one in your deck and you don't completely shut down the combo. So The primary purpose of this card is to be a support towards Wakashi to enable the rest of your turn. Alright everyone, we have a modern Merfolk deck in front of us, and it might not be the most up-to-date Merfolk deck, but it will do for the purposes of this video. Now I'll try to keep this portion very small. I can get pretty into talking about decks, so I'll try to keep it brief. You have cards like the finishers, which is what you're building around. So you have Lord of Atlantis, Master of the Pearl Trident, and Vidalian Hexcatcher. All three of these merfolk are things that are able to pump up your entire board of merfolk. They are able to make your merfolk bigger, attack for more, and end the game faster. Some of them are even able to give Island Walk. Now, when you play cards like this, your primary purpose is going to be to pump up your board of merfolk. For cards like this, though, when there are so many cards that do the same effect, you need to look at the secondary purpose. So the secondary purpose of Vidalian Hexcatcher is to sacrifice a merfolk to interact with your opponent, to stop them from doing something. You have to give up part of your board to prevent your opponent from winning, to prevent them from making a move that could win the game. Not every game you won't need to sacrifice something every game. So that's not going to be the primary purpose of your card. It's the reason you're playing this card over another card, but the primary purpose is to use the pump ability to make bigger merfolk. Now, when you look at the cards built around it, you're going to see a lot of merfolk. With that in mind, it being a merfolk is not the primary purpose of running that card. Svaelun being a merfolk is not why we run Svaelun. Tideshaper being a merfolk is not why we run Tideshaper. It's why we looked at Tideshaper. So you can't just go pick any of your favorite 8-drop merfolk that makes you do a silly dance and you get a fun effect out of it. That's not a primary purpose. You're playing a card because it's a merfolk that does some weird thing. You're looking for what is my deck missing. And a deck that is able to race the opponent, well, how can we ensure that we beat our opponent? Well, the ways we can do that is we can stop them from doing what they're doing, and we can make us go faster. So let's start with the stuff that makes us go faster, because that's the stuff that is more that comes forward more easily. So we have Silvergall Adept as a way to draw a card. If this card did not draw a card, we would not play this card. Sure, it's a 2-drop merfolk, but it has such a limiting ability of needing another one in hand that you would need that payoff. This is a card that might make you think, oh, I have to build around this because it requires another merfolk. No, we're building around the finishers. This is a card you can play with. It benefits you from building around your finishers. But this is a card that gives us card advantage. Something like Svaelun is another thing that gives us card advantage. A lot of people will also say, okay, the primary purpose I'm playing Svaelun is because it's something that's hard to remove. It's a threat that immediately makes itself known on board. Or maybe it's, I'm trying to protect my creatures. What spot is Svaelun filling in your deck? If you're going indestructible, maybe it's trying to play defensively. If you're going on the aggressive side, maybe you're trying to attack, draw more cards, play more things. A card like Svaelun is going to be a little bit of a Swiss Army knife, but you need to decide when you're building your deck, why are you playing Svaelun? Are you playing it because it's the best merfolk that you see on MTG Goldfish or Moxfield? Or are you playing it because you know what your plan is, your game plan, when you drop a Svaelun? When we look at these lands, Ether Vial, pretty straightforward. You're playing it so that you can play more merfolk. You already have the card draw. I have Svaelun under card draw because it will add consistency to my deck. And consistency is what allows me to play the other cards and feel good about it. Ether Vial allows you to profit off of that and play more merfolk towards your ultimate goal of winning with your finishers. If you have Cavern of Souls, if you have, what is the actual name of this card? Switch printing. Here we go. Okay, it's Minimo. I'm used to this art. If you have Minimo, School at Water's Edge, you're using it as a land. Mutavault as a land. These cards are lands before anything else. Their purpose is to cast cards. The reason why you play Mutavault over other lands is because it has the ability to become a creature that can get pumped up by your finishers. But its primary purpose is to be a land. You would not replace Mutavault with a creature. And that's the important part. If Mutavault's primary purpose is to be a creature, then it should be interchangeable with any other merfolk you would consider playable in this deck. Minimo is something that you can use to untap your Svaelun so that you can get so you can attack and then use it to block, because that way you're able to accelerate your game plan while also being able to slow down your opponent. But its primary purpose is to cast something. Otherwise, why are we not playing Kiora's Follower, a creature that is able to untap a permanent? Same with card draw. Why are we not playing more Silvergill Adepts? We're trying to play our cards, not trying to draw a bunch of cards with no mana. Now, when we get over to our cards here, with our negation part of our interaction with our opponent, we have Tishana's Tidebinder as a way to prevent our opponents from using abilities that remain on the board for a longer duration of time, or one critical ability. The One Ring, for example. If we counter the One Ring, the One Ring's ability, the trigger, then it's just a card, a legendary artifact that sits on the board. If we are able to use it for our, at any, in response to its enter the battlefield ability, then we're able to stop them from gaining protection, and we're able to go back towards our finishers and win the game. Merfolk Trickster is a way that we can tap any of their blockers to win the game, or we can flash it in during their turn and tap down what they're using to attack us. That is a way that we are able to use. The primary purpose is to stop our opponent's creatures from doing things. Your secondary effects could be, or your secondary purposes could be along the lines of, on the chance that it could kill a Tarmogoyf, right? Well, it's not removal. It's negation. It's prevention of game plan. Your opponent might leave up blockers. They might try to swing a big board. Your point of Merfolk Trickster is to stop them from doing that, not to kill something, even though it can. Force of Negation is going to be a way that you can stop a game-winning card. It is not going to be necessarily thrown around willy-nilly, especially if you're casting it for its free ability, which is getting rid of a card in your hand, which slows you down, but you're able to use this as a way to stop our opponent. Its secondary ability of being able to be free is going to be something that gets this a spot in our deck over something like Counterspell, even though it can get more stuff. Okay, Brazen Borrower, the primary reason we play this card is because it is removal. The secondary reason we play this card is because it is a creature that we can play later that is harder to deal with. Now, since the printing of Orcish Bowmasters, Brazen Borrower has left the meta a little more. This is an older deck list. But it is still important to look. This is a removal spell. If you look at today, this isn't some other creature. This isn't going to be a Silvergill Adept. This is going to be a Dismember. This is going to be another Odawara. This is going to be something that removes something. If you look at Dismember, primary purpose is that it's a removal spell. Reason that we're using it is because it's a lower cost version of the other removal spells that we could imagine. Even if those might be better, we are playing this because it is able to be cast for 1 mana and deal with a large threat. Odawara, sure, it's a land, but we have 22 cards dedicated to casting something. Odawara is played as a way to remove something. And so even though its secondary purpose here is to be a land, its primary purpose is to be removal. And finally, Tideshaper. Its primary purpose is to be able to make our finishers lethal. It's a way that we are able to use it to remove our opponent. We're able to make our creatures unblockable. Now, if you're in a match where they're already playing islands, then it becomes, okay, let me take out your best land. That best land many times is the secondary purpose, but the reason why you play Tideshaper used to be Spreading Seas. Spreading Seas is an enchantment that makes something an island. So now you're playing Tideshaper. Its primary purpose is to create an island to give your things island walk. Its secondary purpose is to act as a removal. That's why I put it under the removal category. But it's to act as removal for your opponent's lands. Whether it's Urza Saga to completely kill the land, or it's another dual color land, or a monocolor land that maybe your opponent is low mana on something, which, once again, in consistency, you can't rely on it. You can't rely on your opponent not playing blue. The reason why you're playing Tideshaper is to create consistency. Even if your opponent's playing blue, Tideshaper's in there to make sure that your opponent is playing blue. That way you can attack. Its secondary purpose is to limit the opponent. Alright everyone, I hope that the talking through, I know this ended up being a longer video than most of my videos. I hope that this was helpful with understanding primary purpose of a card in your deck versus secondary. Primary, why are you running the card at all? Why are you considering that kind of effect? And secondary purpose, why is that card better than the other cards with that effect? I hope that you found this helpful no matter what game you play. Hopefully you were able to follow along with the different card games that I mentioned. If this is something that you like, let me know down below, and I will see you next time.